Hi everyone, my name is Sam Michaels and I'm the Toronto lawyer for Click to Refund. So I wanted to talk to you about the recent changes that have come in with the Canadian Transport Agency and the new passenger protection regulations. So these are a set of rules that are basically going to protect passengers for delays, denials of boarding, or for different problems that can come up during the flight itself. It's a really interesting new rule and a really important regime that's going to protect passengers and stop this power imbalance where if you have an issue with an airline, there's really, before now, been no option or no real recourse that you can follow. It's a really great, I think, alternative and a new path for passengers to follow that's actually going to be easy and simple and straightforward to get some basic reasonable compensation when something's gone wrong. So the regulation itself actually mirrors largely what's already happening in the European Union. The EU has a regulation that basically protects from if you're delayed, you get certain monetary compensation, and during the flight, the airline needs to protect certain standards of care. And a lot of those rules have been brought over here to Canada. So the EU rule is really straightforward. It's been through the courts a bunch of times. So there's a lot of interpretation and analysis to tell us how to follow that rule and what steps need to be followed. What's been nice about that is over the 4 years of Click to Refund's growth in Europe and across the world, we've really seen a really high success rate in Europe. We now are able to get over 90% of our claims successfully compensated for our customers. And that's because the European system is really well established and has a bunch of interpretations and analysis that help us outline exactly where compensation is owed. So what's happening in Canada is because those rules are relatively new, we don't have the same depth of analysis that we have in Europe. In Canada, the rules really just came in July of 2019, and they're actually already being disputed by a bunch of the airlines. So what's happening is some of the airlines are going to federal court and essentially saying that the rules are too punitive. They go too far on behalf of the passengers. So we're going to have to wait to see what the court says or how they rule on the validity of these regulations. Once those rulings come in and once more cases go through the court, it's really going to help us to outline when compensation is entitled and what arguments the airline can use to say that no compensation is owing. So for example, right now, we see a lot of situations where an airline will say the denial of boarding or the delay was due to a safety reason. And unfortunately, the new regulations under the CTA don't really define very well what exactly qualifies as a safety issue. Is that mechanical repairs, or are we only talking about, an issue to the ability of the plane to fly, for example? So until those things start getting clarified through the courts, airlines are going to have the option to basically try and postpone or argue against the validity of a certain claim based on the interpretation or analysis of these rules, which are still not overly well defined. What we found so far is that because there's these interpretational issues in Canada, when we have a situation where we have the option to either go through the European system or the Canadian system, we'll generally prefer the European system because it's a little more established, a little more straightforward. That being said, what's come into Canada, I think, is a really positive change and evolution for air passenger rules. We're really looking forward to seeing this pick up over time as the rules become better defined and it becomes clear for the airlines what their obligations are. We've actually been sort of right at the forefront of bringing this into the Canadian market. So not only do we have years of experience in Europe that we brought over, we also had the chance to go to Ottawa to consult with the CTA about the upcoming regulation. Now that it's come on board, we're right at the head of getting these complaints filed, representing customer rights, and trying to bring this regulation into the mainstream. So if you have one of these situations, if you've been denied, delayed boarding, or even if maybe your flight was canceled or overbooked, you can go online at clicktorefund.com, fill out our online form, and there may be compensation under the EU system or now under the Canadian system too.